When is this market gonna stop going up? Holy shizzles, this thing is just melt after melt after melt. I know there was a pullback in there somewhere Friday, but if you blink, you missed it. It was just all day melting. And that just seems what this thing is doing. It just melt up, dip bot, melt up. It's been on a tear since Christmas Eve. So we're going to talk about new levels to look for going into the beginning of the week. Let me give the official welcome to Stock Market Mutterings. This is for the 19th. Remember, you guys get Monday off. You'll eventually remember that if you get up to trade. You'll see that the market is closed. At least when it's closed, it can't go up, right? So we're going to take a look at some of these levels. Then what we're going to do is look at some individual stock names and have a couple interesting things I want to discuss. Now, before I start, though, if you guys need help with your personal trading, take a moment, visit thelincolnlist.com, click on the Trade Room tab. I'll put the thing over here on the screen. Just cut and paste the link or click on the link if you can. And don't forget about the new DVD, Rock Solid. I've got a lot of great response to this. It is a free DVD. Covers the 3 main trading components it takes to be successful. The link is also on the screen. Click it, give it a watch, see if that helps you. So let's talk a little bit here about Mr. Spy, because where we left off, I got Apple on there, excuse me. Where we left off last week, if you remember, the name of the title was the 200-day kisser. And what happened last week is it runs right into that 200-day moving average. That's this teal line I've got on my chart. And it just kissed it, and then it pulled back. And where it nestled in, it came down to the 10 moving average on a daily. Again, it's just a guide here with these moving averages, but that was the resistance, and that was the area that we were looking at forward. Basically, what this thing does is it melts up the entire week. Any attempt to get this thing to be sold, you had some bad news come out. If you follow me on Twitter, you saw I was talking about this. The market has shrugged off every piece of bad news that come its way. You had a couple of flushes there. I think it was on Thursday or something like that. The market sold off early, was able to recover. Maybe it was Wednesday or Thursday. I can't exactly recall. But there were attempts. You saw attempts at some selling pressure coming into the market. It was basically just shrugged off like it was no big thing. And here you are Friday. You gapped up above the 200 moving average. I know there was a pullback in there somewhere, like a tiny little fade, but if you blink, you missed it because it was just bell to bell, melt up buying. And that's all this thing has been doing. It's been on a relentless tear since Christmas Eve. And if you look back here, you really haven't had any type of aggressive selling in this market. You have one day, which was like the second trading session of the year on the 3rd. You come back up here, you had a couple red days like on the 23rd and the 24th or something like that. And you had this little pullback, like we said, the 200-day kisser. It was just 2 little small fading days and then right back up. So there hasn't been any aggressive selling pressure to the downside, or at least sustainable, since the second trading session of the month. Now, that could obviously change at any moment. But as I said, there has been enough bad news to get the party started, but everybody just ends up leaving the party, going back to the bullish camp and buying these things up. And it's just been that way. So until that changes, it is what it is. Now that we're above the 200 moving average, and after saying that, I can't see where you're not making the case now going back to 280. You got a double top that goes from the early part of November and then back to December where this whole thing started. So you're looking at roughly, let's say 280 to 281. That's where the sell-off correction started. So if it gets back to, you got 2 or 3 more points here, and this whole thing is going to be erased. That whole entire December of disaster is going to be erased, and then you're going to be right back up. Now, that obviously will be a much more significant resistance level than any of these other resistance levels we've been watching on the way up. Moving averages, 200-day, 10-day, 50-day. It's going to be a lot more significant there. But as I sit here and I do this, barring any unforeseen circumstance, like plague, famine, the earth gets poisoned, I don't know, something on that level, I can't see it not at least trying to make a run to 280. Now, obviously, anything can happen. I've been doing this for 20 years. You could wake up and the market could decide it wants to dump on some stupid stuff. You just never know. That's just the way it is. But the way things are operating now, it is until it isn't, and you've got to take a look at it. Now, if we do get some selling, we would have to start right out at the 200-day moving average and the 10 moving average, so we'll say 271. Unless you can really start getting under 271 with some aggression, then I just can't see how you're going to sustain any selling right now. Now, having said that, most of these indices have done really well. Almost all of them have retraced December sell-off. But, this is even the Qs. But when you go back and you look at big beta names, the FANG names, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Facebook, Apple, yes, these things bounced significantly from their Christmas Eve lows, obviously. But they are nowhere near, at least most of them, are nowhere near where they were in December. So you saw how the market had corrected itself. But you're noticing that most of these FANG names, I'm sure there's a couple other out there that made it, have not, they bounced on Christmas Eve, but they haven't really, I guess what I'm trying to say is authority. Like, Apple's still under its 200-day moving average. Facebook had some good earnings getting rejected off of its 200-day moving average and fading. NVDA comes out with what was at the time, well, I guess, solid earnings, gets this monstrous bounce. The stock was up like $12 at one time right after ER. By the time Friday closes, it's only up $2.80. So these things, watch these things. And what I mean by that is, if selling pressure enters the market, you'd have to think that these things go a little bit lower because they're just not participating fully with the rally that we're seeing. The other part that you want to pay attention to is maybe, if things stay solid, maybe they're just being overlooked right now and money will start flowing back into them a little bit later. But just something I want to throw out there. We're going to find out here real soon. But it's an interesting note. I just wanted to make everybody aware of it, that these things have been lagging behind the bulk of other stocks. Now, as we look at a few names, I'm going to throw some new ones in here. I want to look at this iRobot. I guess the world has just come down to robotic vacuum cleaners. I mean, that's where it is right now. You're looking at the future, it's robotic vacuum cleaners that cost like $500. Or like Lovesac, $750 bean bags. We're a pretentious society. We need these types of items. So this thing is really vert. I'd like to entertain the idea of shorting it. And maybe I'll just stick with the word entertaining it. That's as far as I go. I don't know if I'm actually going to push the button because there have been some really sexy and amazing quality short setups, and I have taken them throughout the week only to be disappointed with either 30 cents or no move at all because it's just been the toughest road to roll when you get these melt up markets. But you're all the way up here to this resistance. I mean, this thing's done this before. And you just look at this big old ramp back here. This is just slightly over the resistance level. Let's just watch it. Maybe there's some, I'd like to think that if we start to sell a little bit, maybe it's not the beginning of the week, maybe it's later in the week. Maybe this thing moves to 120, 125s, but I'd like to put it on the list to start watching it for a short. Yes, for a short. Now, on the flip side of that, if you somehow were fortunate enough, or I say fortunate in air quotes, to get some sort of flush out or gap down to start the day, and this thing was down like $5, I think you'd have to do that. I think you'd have to take that trade. This is something that we do a lot in the trade room. I'll give you an example was Lulu. If you get an opportunity to get a really strong stock on a massive flush, and this is something that you can't really predict, it just sort of happens a certain day for whatever reasons, maybe it's news generated, but sometimes you get these really big panic flushes like this, and they make for some really good reversals, especially stuff like this where they gap down and flush. If you get them on strong stocks, they're good for some nice little reversals. So watch that too. We'll look at maybe entertaining the short if this thing goes a little bit higher. If it does flush out one day, you wake up and it's down 5 or 6, it's probably worth a little bit of a buy. Now, speaking of Lulus and the rest of those, these retailers, not only are people into robotic vacuum cleaners and $750 bean bags, but they love decks. Here's another one, just like Uggs. They just want some Uggs or something. This thing here is lining up for a pretty nice breakout here on the daily. I mean, it's just right up here. It's been struggling a little bit with 145.50. 146.50. Closed on Friday up to 146.20. Just watch this. See if there's a volume or a nice push or some sort of consolidation and a press through there. I think you'll get one more kick to the upside out of deck. Another one is COUP. Now this thing was already on a pretty big roll. I mean, look, I'm sorry. Sometimes I got to chuckle when I see these charts. It's like, what the hell? It's like W day and Twillo. It's like, where are you guys going? And I just basically, like a lot of people, we stare at them and don't buy enough of them. But this thing is up a lot. I mean, a whole lot here, from 60 up to 96. But again, consolidating at the top, flagging here a little bit. If things stay the same, I mean, this thing hasn't crossed a 10 moving average since the 4th of January. So you keep bouncing off of it religiously. Watch it. I mean, if things stay the same, you've got all of these things lining up for flag patterns that could be setting up for a breakout. And then the last one, we'll do a little PYX. This thing looked better earlier Friday than it did late Friday. It's a pretty big pullback that you got late in the day. And you got a little different animal here. The younger price, the cheaper price is going to bring in a lot of the cheaper trading chat rooms, and they're going to pile in on stuff. But this was a really good looking flag breakout right here. You had a pretty nice ascending wedge, nice little breakout there. I was kind of hoping that it would hold the 24 level, but it didn't. Just watch this thing. If it wants to re-gear back up in here, it's got the kind of hype. It's got the kind of, let's say, the look. It's got the look, man. Maybe it's got the look. Then it wants to maybe work its way up to 29, maybe even 30. It looked really good, as I said, early on Friday. Would like to seen it had closed at 24, but again, you got another solid one there. So anyway, let's leave it at that, because, you know, we don't know where we're going to get, but I got a feeling we're going to get more melt. But at some point, it will stop. Just like when the market was selling and everybody wanted to know when it was stopped. It'll find a way to change itself, right? And if you remember back then, just go back in December and watch my stock market mutterings. I was sitting there begging and pleading, like, you will never probably get an opportunity like this. You know, not only can you capitalize on shorts, but at some point you're going to find this incredible buying opportunity. And you've seen a 20% retracement of that sell-off this year. So, I mean, that's amazing. Remember those moments going forward, because those are the kind of opportunities that come by very few and far between, and you want to capitalize. So anyway, guys, have a great week of trading. Enjoy your day off. As always, if you need help, you know how to reach out to me. Thanks for watching the video. Take care and trade well.